Hello, Magic Casters! My name is Chance, welcome to my Spellbook, and thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of our Cantrip series. If you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, you're probably a little bit confused right now, and understandably so. You're not going crazy, YouTube hasn't malfunctioned. We are going to be revisiting the cantrips. I'm doing this for a couple reasons. First and foremost, I'm really not happy with how the older videos have stood up. They weren't my best work, they were when I was still really new to YouTube. I've learned a lot since then and I've improved in a lot of ways as well. And I'd like the videos to reflect something that I'm actually proud of, you know? In addition to that, between Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, several erratas, and several Sage Advice posts, a lot's changed for the cantrips, and I feel like in order to have this channel withstand the test of time, I'm gonna need to address these. There's also a lot of ideas I've been playing around with these videos, and I think I finally have a formula I'm gonna be happy with for the long haul, so I might as well execute it, right? With that out of the way, we're going to be taking a look at Acid Splash today, which is one of the more discussed cantrips. Its usefulness is often harped on a little bit, although for what it is, I think it's pretty good overall, and whether or not it stacks is beside the point, it's still pretty cool. The Acid Splash is usable by the Sorcerer, Wizard, and the Artificer, as so far as to say it is found in their spell lists. There are a handful of other ways to gain access to this cantrip. Magic Initiate is one such example, but in terms of where it's found, Sorcerer, Wizard, and the Artificer. And it is found in the good old Player's Handbook, so everyone should have access to it. Now, if you'd like to see all of the cantrips broken down, please feel free to click on the playlist by either clicking on that little eye icon up top there and selecting the relevant playlist, or waiting until the end of the video and selecting one of the end cards. Now, without further ado, let's move on to its mechanics. If you're not familiar with how the damaging cantrips work, they become more powerful as you level up as a character. So at first level, it'll deal 1d6 damage. At 5th level, it'll increase to 2d6. At 11th level, it'll increase to 3d6. And upon reaching 17th level, it'll cap off at 4d6 damage. The effect at a glance, damage up to 2 creatures so long as they were within 5 feet of each other, so adjacent to each other. The cast time is 1 standard action, the range is 60 feet, the duration is instantaneous, and it requires a Dexterity saving throw, and it deals 0 damage should your target succeed on the save. The components are verbal and somatic, meaning you have to speak forth an incantation, as well as gesture with one hand. The school is Conjuration, and the damage type is unsurprisingly acid. There's a lot of good things to point out here. First and foremost, the ability to damage 2 creatures simultaneously in a single turn. It is super useful, especially at those early levels where the odds of you taking on several weaker opponents are quite likely. The biggest criticism of this spell that I've seen is that its damage type is acid, which is often resisted, or in some cases, some creatures may be immune to it. There are some ways to cheese around that, or at the very least mitigate it, and we'll be getting into that a little bit later on. Before we do, however, let's take a look at its full description. You hurl a bubble of acid. Choose 1 or 2 creatures you can see within range. If you choose 2, they must be within 5 feet of each other. A target must succeed on a Dexterity saving throw, or take 1d6 acid damage. This spell's damage increases by 1d6 when you reach 5th level, 2d6, 11th level, 3d6, and 17th level, 4d6. Now, if you haven't read through all the spells, you won't know this, but as someone who has, Wizards of the Coast doesn't really provide a lot of flavor text. From time to time, they do, but it kind of depends on the book you're reading it from, and when it was released, and who was involved in actually creating those spells. But in terms of the core rulebook or the player's handbook, they're all pretty plain Jane in terms of their description. And you know what? Where most would look down on that, I would consider it to be a rare opportunity to put your own spin on how this spell functions. My personal favorite way of describing Acid Splash is, I raise up my hand as though to pluck an apple from a tree, and between my fingers forms a simple greenish bubble, sitting gingerly on my fingertips. I then lean over to my hand and give it a gentle blow, and cast it off into the wind. The bubble drifts lazily, as though not having a care in the world, and then it seeks out its prey, darting straight towards two unsuspecting foes, after which I ask my dungeon master to roll a dexterity save for each of the targets. It's pretty cool, and based on the roll they make, it deals however many d6 of acid damage. It's just a cool way to flavor up the caster experience. Try not to make your descriptions too long or too wordy, and don't do them all the time if it's a long combat. Just kind of do it the first time you do it and then leave it at that. If it's a group you're playing with over the long term, maybe just a couple times in the first few sessions, and then once every other session from there on out should be fine. It's just an interesting bit of flavor to add to your character, and might even net you some sweet inspiration if you have a DM that appreciates that kind of stuff. Now let's move on to what my channel has currently become more well known for. Let's get into some alternative uses here. So before I flesh out these alternative uses, there are some things I have to talk about in regards to the spell itself. There's a couple things that really limit it. Two in particular. First and foremost, its duration is instantaneous. What that means is, as soon as you cast it and its effect takes place, it's gone. The acid doesn't linger. There is one spell where the acid does linger, at least one early level spell. Sadly, this is not it. And secondly is, you choose one or two creatures. What this line in particular means is that you cannot use it to target objects, which is sad, but there are some ways to kind of cheese it. It's worth having a conversation with your dungeon master about. They may allow it. In the past, I've allowed Acid Splash to be used on things like shining up coins, things of that nature, anything that would require a weak acid. With that being said, there have been cases throughout history of individuals using weak acid to do things like slowly erode away at steel bars, things of that nature. This is going to be one of those things where it's up to the dungeon master. By raw, you're not allowed to do it. However, to give the spell a little bit of an extra allure, I personally don't see a hard time with someone, for example, being able to cast Acid Splash on a metal object and have someone make a strength check with advantage to see if they can break it, as opposed to just a straight strength check. I think that'd be an interesting way to do it, but nonetheless, let's get into some alternative uses that you should be able to use by raw. The first and foremost is just straight up disintegrating dudes. This does play around with the idea of, is a corpse still a creature? In my opinion, I don't see why not. I can see why, if you really start to finagle the details a little bit, you can make the argument that it's just a sack of meat at that point, but that gets into the nature of what is a soul and what is life. Personally, I believe that if the spell can work on undead, which it can, it should be able to work on just your generic corpse. Now, disintegration might take a while, but what you might be able to do is, if you have the Animate Dead spell, you could use this on a corpse to a point where it was just its skeleton, and you could get a skeleton as opposed to a zombie out of it like that. I think that's a pretty fair way of using this spell that I don't think any dungeon masters would have a really hard time with. The second interesting way of using Acid Splash is to use it to change someone's appearance. This would likely be very similar to what Scar did to Tim Marco in the Fullmetal Alchemist series. If you haven't watched it, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but long story short, This one dude uses pseudo-magical abilities to mess up another dude's face so they can escape. It's not like full-on plastic surgery, he kind of just melts part of it, and that would be very similar to what you'd do here. Is it super useful? It depends on the circumstances, and if you have access to a higher level healer, either through a temple or a church or one of your own party members, this might be a great way to temporarily mess up their face, have them leave, and then fix it up later on. I think it's pretty cool. That would definitely be allowed. There is a handful of others as well, but I didn't come up with the ones I'm going to address in the future, so I can't really take credit for them. And I think you guys will really appreciate what I've done here, but before we get into that juicy stuff, let's get into some potential combos. So I mentioned earlier, one of this spell's biggest downsides is that it deals acid damage, which is very commonly resisted to and in some cases outright immune to. There are some ways to cheese that though. The first and easiest way of doing it is through a feat called Elemental Adept. What Elemental Adept does is you select a damage type, one of which is acid, and the spells you cast ignore resistance to the damage you chose. In addition, when you make a roll for a spell that deals that type of damage, you treat any ones as a 2, so it does increase your overall damage that way. But the most important thing is that it allows you to ignore resistances. It doesn't help with immunities, sadly, I know, it sucks, but we'll get into how to get around that altogether a little bit later on. Before we do, let's have a couple honorable mentions. The first one we're going to be diving into is the Wizard's Potent Cantrip. With this feature, starting at 6th level, your damaging cantrips affect even creatures that avoid the brunt of the effect. When a creature succeeds on a saving throw against your cantrip, the creature takes half the cantrip's damage, but suffers no additional effects from that cantrip. What this allows you to do is it basically means you'll never waste an attack action with a cantrip. Simply because even if they succeed on that dexterity saving throw, they're still going to be taking half damage as opposed to none at all, which is quite nice. Now let's take a look at the Draconic Sorcerer's Elemental Affinity. If you're not super familiar with the Draconic Sorcerer, we will be doing a series on all of the Sorcerer's main class and subclasses and breaking them all down. Click on the link somewhere for that. It's not done yet, but I'll put it in the video when I get around to it. Or just look on the channel, either or, but I'll try to make a mental note. In any case, when the Draconic Sorcerer reaches 6th level, it gains Elemental Affinity. When you cast a spell that deals damage of the type associated with your Draconic ancestry, you can add your Charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. At the same time, you can spend 1 sorcery point to gain resistance to that damage type for 1 hour. The sorcery point thing doesn't really pertain to us, but what does matter to us is it allows you to add your Charisma modifier onto one of the damage rolls. You are affecting 2 creatures at once here, or you have the potential to at the very least. You can only apply it to 1, but, it's an extra handful of damage, which would otherwise not be there, so for that reason and that reason alone, I do think it is worth mentioning. Now let's get into the good stuff, the creme de la creme, the ultimate way to cheese yourself around that nasty, nasty acid damage. We're going to be looking at the meta magic called Transmuted Spell. This particular meta magic was added in during the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything expansion, and it's pretty dang cool. When you cast a spell that deals a type of damage from the following list, you can spend 1 sorcery point to change that damage type to one of the other listed types. Acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, and thunder, which was, strangely enough, actually sonic damage in previous editions, but they changed it to thunder, because it kind of makes more sense with the fantasy world, I guess, but that's beside the point. The point is acid damage is on that list, right front and center, all glorious and such. What this means is, just by spending 1 sorcery point, you can switch it to a different damage type altogether. It's hard to say it's a negative if it's a different damage type altogether, right? Now, there is an argument to be made that you don't have meta magic because you're not a sorcerer. And to that I say, man, you really gotta check out our feat series, cause there's a feat that will give you access to meta magic regardless of your class. The only stipulation is you have to be able to cast at least one spell, which, I mean, if you're watching this video, it's safe to assume that you can. The feat is called Metamagic Adept, and it gives you access to 2 Sorcerer Metamagics and gives you 2 sorcery points. Now, I understand the argument, is it really worth the resource investment? And most would argue no. And to that I say, fair enough. But I also have to respond with, it's still a potential combo that solves one of the largest issues with this cantrip. And you have to admit, if you were given a cantrip that dealt damage to 2 targets simultaneously, and a d6 is fine, it's still better than Vicious Mockery at the very least, right? It would make it a hell of a lot more viable. And for that reason, if you're a sorcerer and you're just trying to clean up a couple kobolds or goblins or what have you, and you know they're weak and you know they're one shot away, you might as well, right? It's only 1 sorcery point. If you're a decently leveled sorcerer, you'll have access to a ton of them, and you can always convert spell slots to sorcery points and vice versa. So, I mean, is it worth it? To that I say it's purely circumstantial. In most cases, no, probably not. But when you really need it to come in clutch, it might be pretty cool at the very least. Now, if you were paying attention in the beginning, or if you've been a long-time viewer of this channel, you'll know that this is the second time this video is coming up. I'll leave the original in a pinned comment somewhere or in the description, and I'll just leave it as unlisted. I'm not super proud of it, don't judge me too harshly, but what it did have is a ton of amazing comments on it. I make a point of reading all the comments I'm able to. Sometimes guys print them out more quickly than I can ever hope to read them, but for the most part I've read all of them, and there's a couple honorable mentions. So let's take a look at them. The heroes of the past. Let me know what you think of this idea, by the way. I think it's really cool, and I think it's a great way to pay homage to all the great commenters that keep this channel constantly viable, at least so long as 5th edition's around, and it should be for quite some time, hopefully, fingers crossed. It's been out for a long time already, but enough of that nonsensical rambling. Let's get into the heroes. I do apologize if I mispronounce any of your handles, and to be fair, I might just paraphrase them. Trackstar Omega. Is there a way to put acid onto/into a weapon? I thought of using this to add damage to a sword or something, but I'm not sure if it would do that or not. Perhaps another spell. Sadly, because of the instantaneous nature of Acid Splash, you would not be able to do it, at least not directly. However, if you happen to go with the Pact of the Blade Warlock, and you can use your blade as a spellcast and focus, I see no reason why you can't flavor it as though you have a ball of acid hurled from your blade as you swing it. I think that would be pretty cool. However, there are better feats and abilities for doing what you're talking about. The most obvious one is the Poisoner feat, which was added into Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So if you're trying to do this particular effect, check out our feat videos and you'll see it there. Now let's take a look at my good friend Dracos here. Wonder if you could modify the Shape Water spell to Shape Acid to use it in conjunction with Acid Splash. Throw the acid, then move it around the battlefield. LOL. This, to me, actually really reminds me of the mechanical function of Flaming Sphere, which lets you use a bonus action to move a flaming ball of death around the battlefield. However, its spell level is certainly quite a bit higher than Cantrip, but same general effect. The combination of Shape Water and Acid Splash is actually an interesting thing to talk about, more so from the Shape Water angle. If you look at the way the Shape Water cantrip's worded, it doesn't say you can only manipulate pure water, only water, so it's worth having a conversation with your dungeon master in regards to atomic theory and chemistry and see exactly whether or not you can move around water with something dissolved in it, or if you can just only move around pure water and it separates out any impurities. Either way, it's pretty cool and worth having that conversation, and and potentially cheesable if you're creative enough. Now, I'm just going to say Paulo, because I don't do too hot with fancy characters. A question. This spell gets stronger if you put on a 5th level slot or if the player is 5th level. I can understand where the confusion would be in the original video, and this is a fair question to someone who's new to 5e or new to spellcasting in general. It relates to your player level. Whatever level your player is, whatever milestone it's reached so far, is what you use for determining the spell's overall damage. And Sice. I remember playing a character that I'd tried to have a lot of acid or poison spells on, and what I'd do with Acid Splash is I would throw it at an enemy's eyes, if they had any, to blind them, making it much easier to fight them. I absolutely love this. I think this is cool as heck, man. I might have them roll with advantage on the Dexterity save, just to kind of balance it out, but I don't really see a reason why it wouldn't blind them, right? At least for a round or so. I think that'd be pretty cool, to be honest. Sice, you're a mad genius, man. I understand the spell doesn't say it can do that. I get that 100%. But logically, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Especially if you're a higher level caster, and especially if you're willing to invest resources into acid and poison as damage types, as they are so heavily resisted. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to have a little bit more fun with them just to balance them out and entice players to play the character they want to play as. Naturally, have a conversation with your dungeon master about it, see what they think, but personally, man, I tip my wizard hat to you. I think it's a great idea. Thank you so much for all of you commenters. I do appreciate all of you. If your comment wasn't featured, it's not that yours wasn't good enough. It's just there were so many good contenders. I had to just pick what felt right and what would fit on the screen and still be legible. In any case, let me know what your favorite uses are down beneath, of course, and who knows, you might be featured on another video. Although I doubt I'll be redoing this one, I might have like weekly videos I put up that showcase my favorite comments. Now let's move on to my personal thoughts on Acid Splash. Although I do understand why so many in the spellcasting community have a bone to pick with Acid Splash, overall, I think with the right player and the right dungeon master, it can have enough flavor and provide enough mechanical benefits to be viable even during late game. However, by raw, it does leave a lot to be desired, so depending on the circle you're in, that might still be the case. However, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit optimistic, or maybe I'm just too infatuated with these spells, but I think it has a certain charm to it. Let me know what you think down beneath, though. Mention any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, or build ideas of your own down beneath as well. And let me know what you think of this new video style. It is quite a bit longer than my previous Acid Splash video. Links down beneath in the description if you want to check them out. They will be made unlisted, although they will not be deleted, so you should still be able to find them on the channel. But yeah, let me know what you think, guys, and if you'd like to gain access to a free one-shot, please check out the Guild Hall, links down beneath, and use code WELCOME to get yours, and check out my other channel as well. I have one about Pathfinder 2e, so if you're curious about that, might as well check it out. Subscribe, pretty please. Subscribe to this channel too if you like. That being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and as always, happy spellcasting.